Hey guys, welcome back to another episode, and tonight I have committed the most cosmic of sins. I watched Cosmic Sin. So Cosmic Sin came out earlier in March. It is directed by one Edward Drake, who is a guy who wrote another Bruce Willis sci-fi movie that I covered recently called Breach. And this movie shares a bunch of similarities between that, insofar as they're both low-budget sci-fi affairs with a few named actors sprinkled throughout. So Cosmic Sin, I gotta look up this asshole's name. Bruce Willis plays John McSpacehard or something. I forget what the fuck. So Cosmic Sin takes place like 300 or 400 years in the future, where humanity has their first interaction with an alien species, and it's on some like back planet in a different galaxy or something, and it doesn't go well. And then it turns out some of the aliens arrive on Earth. And when that happens, you naturally call up Bruce Willis to come in and save the day. The movie also stars Frank Grillo from like the Purge movies. And he's been in a ton of stuff, but he's recognizable. So, some hijinks ensue, some alien battles, some CGI-ness, some space suits. So we'll get through all this, but that's the basic premise of the movie. Nothing mind-blowing, really very predictable. So, if you've seen Breach and you thought it was the worst movie ever, I've gotten a lot of comments about it being the worst movie ever. I don't think it was, but it's not a very good movie. You probably have similar thoughts to this. Now, this production quality in this movie is a bit slicker than that. And I know I'm not going to keep comparing to Breach because people get mad when you compare a movie to another one, but okay. So the movie's production quality isn't terrible. Like, there's moments where it looks okay. The lighting is colorful and fun sometimes. Some of the sets are good. There is a mix of CGI occasionally that is okay to bad to passable. All that stuff is kind of fun. I mean, it's a very standard sci-fi thing. Like, there's nothing groundbreaking here. And people are going to come to this movie because Bruce Willis and Frank Grillo's names are mentioned in it. So the cast is really big, and I think they did that on purpose to hide the fact that they can't really get Bruce Willis and Frank Grillo for like a full shooting schedule. Meaning, like, you're bouncing between like 6 characters or so, and you're never really spending that much time with any of them in particular, so you never really get attached to any of them, and it doesn't help the storyline because of that. This movie feels like it's fighting for you to believe that Bruce Willis is in this entire movie. But I almost guarantee that Bruce Willis's stand-in is probably in this movie more than he actually is. If you look at all the scenes where it's just behind his back and you see a bald head. The baldness of the back bald head looks younger than the front when you see Bruce Willis, so it's kind of recognizable. But it hurts the movie a lot because every scene with the Frank or Bruce Willis feels very disconnected, when like these other like B movie actors that you don't recognize are really trying. But you don't get very many shots where you see all the characters together. Instead, you see like a character laying on the ground talking up, and then it'll cut to Bruce Willis, who's probably not in the same room as them, and it all feels very jarring. And that's kind of how like every scene plays out with him. I mean, I talked about this when I did Breach, and this is a business decision to bring Bruce Willis into this movie because it'll get people to watch your movie because they recognize Bruce Willis. But ultimately, I think putting him in this movie, as opposed to just getting a decent B movie actor to actually fill the role out, probably would have made a better movie, in my opinion. But then again, no one would have probably watched it. So there you go. Beyond like the very predictable story, they do bring in a few fun elements, a B-movie schlocky kind of fun. They have all these suits that they made, and there's some costumes, and everything looks like it was made for a cosplay photo shoot. So I don't mean that to be like dismissive, because I do think they look cool, especially as a still. But when you see them animate and you get up close, it does feel like they're a bit cheaper, and it does feel like they have no weight or anything to them, so it doesn't really sell the effect they're going for. When Bruce Willis is in this suit, this metal suit he's been traveling through space in, and it's like flapping in the breeze and shit, it kind of loses like the effect they're going for, so it's just a little disappointing. It's fun, but kind of cheap. But that's where Bruce Willis also like hurts the movie. If it was no-name people, you would have much lower expectations, and that stuff would have been more fun and more appealing, I think. But because Bruce Willis and Frank Grillo are in this, you're thinking this is going to be comparable to their old movies, and it's just not. So you're going to judge it very harshly. At least I think most people will. And like, even if you gave it the benefit of the doubt that these two are like barely in this thing, the storyline is really kind of dumb. It's called Cosmic Sin, which I think is a cool name. And the Cosmic Sin is, if you initiate first contact with an alien, you should strike first and destroy their race, because there's a good chance that they would do it to you. So you have to strike first and make the first cosmic sin. And that's where Bruce Willis as James Ford comes in. He's like this washed up general because he dropped a Q-bomb. Q-bombs are a thing, I guess. And he killed like 70 million people because he needed to, because of stuff. But then they reference Bruce Willis throughout this entire movie, like how much of a legend and how much of a badass he is. But you never see it. When they introduce Bruce Willis, he's sitting at a bar and he looks like he just like doesn't give a shit at all. And then he gets in a fight, but it's all cut so awfully that it doesn't, again, sell what they're talking about. There's melodrama throughout the whole thing with characters that you don't care about, and they die and you're like, who cares? But the movie wants you to care, but I just didn't care. And so at that moment, I would pull out my phone because I just wanted to get on from there. I wanted to get to the fun action scenes. And there are moments where the action's okay, but a lot of times there's like a 15, 20-minute scene, I don't know, maybe a half an hour into this movie, where the aliens, which are just like people, are shooting at people, and it's like they're in this room straight across from each other shooting at each other, and it just goes on, and they're not moving half the time. The aliens are just standing there, and it's like, how are you missing so much? It just got a little old and a little frustrating, I guess. There's a B plot with Bruce Willis and this woman that is supposed to be kind of a through line for his character. It doesn't really work at all because it's not developed enough, much like most of the things in this movie. I wasn't expecting much, so I kind of got what I was expecting, I guess. They do try, I will say that. I think everybody in the production tried, and I do feel for him because I do think this was probably hard, like working around Bruce Willis. Like every scene with him, I'm gonna keep reiterating, it just feels like he's barely there and they're making it work. And there's sequences where it's supposed to be him like dramatic scenes where he's thinking of his wife and blah blah blah, but it's like they didn't have the footage for it, so they show you old footage of his facial expression. You're like, I don't know what that's supposed to mean because it's not really what the scene is trying to represent. But I do give props to the production team. The sound design is really good. There is some decent CGI effects when everything is kind of just a CGI thing and they don't try and put real people into the scenes. Then it falls apart a bit more, but when there's like spaceships in space and stuff, it looks okay. It looks pretty cool. It's kind of passable. And the guys who did the lighting, they tried. They were sticking purple and green lights every fucking place they could in these hallways and stuff. And it did add some dynamics to the visuals, so I'll give them props for that. But yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Yeah, so Cosmic Sin, it's out now. If I sold you on it, then maybe go check it out, but otherwise, I'd probably avoid it. That's all I'm saying. All right, that's going to do it for Cosmic Sin, guys. I will catch you here next time. Goodbye.